Chance to touch some snow, man. Got a chance to touch some snow.
I saw one of your posts. You say one day, what it was, 35 degrees or something, and
Yeah.
then the next day everything was covered with snow.
Everything was covered with snow, man. Everything was covered with snow, and I almost didn't make it back.
No?
Yeah, yeah. So the day that we were coming back, actually, there was a snowstorm coming in, and we driving through, and I'm having to put on my brave Florida face in this snowstorm, like I know what's going on. But yeah, but I was like,
Hey, you didn't tell me, man. Hey, by chance, did you happen to run into Dion Primetime,
no,
Coach
no, no.
Prime?
He was 2 hours away. He was
Okay,
what's that? That's Boulder,
okay.
where Colorado is. So didn't get a chance to see him, but I did get a chance to hear about the game. Unfortunately
Okay.
they didn't pull it off. But you know who did pull it off now?
Who?
You know who did pull it off?
Tell me. Go ahead. I'm waiting now.
The FAMU Rattlers pulled
Oh,
it off at homecoming.
who did they? Oh, yeah. You're right. Who did they play, Greg?
Don't
You
matter.
remember? Don't matter. As long as they won.
I
As
don't
long as
care
they
who
won the
they
homecoming.
play. I
Hey,
don't care who
so,
they
so
play.
so let me ask you: did you see Russell Wilson?
Oh. So listen. So yesterday, in case anybody is wondering right now we're talking NFL right now.
Yeah.
Yesterday, because I was in Colorado for a week, I was an honorary Denver Broncos fan. So I got a chance to see
Okay.
my adopted home team win against
Who did they win against, Greg?
Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, come on.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Hey, Mondo, did they beat Mahomes, the $500 million man?
Like you stole something.
Wait, what was the score?
21-9.
21-9.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're, what do you call that? Fantasy football. You made something.
Man, look here. But listen, Brother Love, for those who are seeing these two faces, you say who are hearing these two voices, but not those who are seeing these two faces, you are listening to two of the most influential voices on this podcast, or in this podcast in Central Florida, Brother Love and Greg Jackson, the dynamic duo. We are guaranteed to always increase your IQ. And tonight, Brother Love, we have nothing less than a stellar show, because we got some things we got to talk about.
Well,
man.
Greg, the first thing, man, what is this month?
So listen, for those who've been keeping track and keep track of the different months, this is National Depression and Mental Health Screening Month. And, Brother Love, there have been a lot of different things that happened. As a matter of fact, as I was driving in, there's somebody on the 417 right now, on one of the overpasses near Moss Road. And apparently it's a gentleman that is suffering from some type of, mental health issue. While over the weekend, while I was in Colorado, I heard about in Lewiston, Maine, there was a gentleman who went into a bowling alley while it was a fundraiser for individuals who are hearing impaired. Shot and killed 18, wounded 13. Then they found that he had killed himself, had some mental health issues. And then early last week, a mom with two twins, with a set of twins, killed her twins and then jumped off of a bridge. So, Brother Love, this is the next to the last day of National Depression and Mental Health Screening Month. And I think it's important to talk to Let's Talk Nation about, if you need help, it's important to let folks know and to speak out so that you can get the help that you need.
You're absolutely correct, Greg. And to that point too, how do you manage it? And I'm inquiring, I'm asking the question here. How do you manage it if you see somebody that you believe may be in a crisis and need some help? How do you approach that person from the standpoint of saying, here's some resources, or pointing them in a specific direction? How do you do it? I don't know.
The unfortunate thing about mental health issues, and I'm not a professional in any stretch of the imagination, but I do counsel people in a sense as an attorney. And I've actually had people to call me as an attorney and say, I want to end it all, and all of this, all of the things that you don't want to hear. And, Doc Polite, he's a mental health counselor as well. And yeah, that's a good conversation, because and Doc, one of the things that I would say is that mental health issues is difficult to assess sometimes, and you don't really know unless and until someone does something like jumps off of a bridge, or threatens to jump off of a bridge, or does something to their child or to themselves. So I mean, I guess, what is the best way to identify someone who may be going through a crisis?
Usually, for many people, you can look at their level of life skill. Okay, how are they handling stress? Are they feeling overwhelmed with stress? Because many times, what we see with many people that are on substances or dealing with mental health, they try to self-medicate. They're
That's a
doing
good
something
point.
to
That's a good
try
point.
to self-medicate. So
Mhm.
looking at the problem, is it a person that's that's constantly pushing the edges with conduct or in, in, intaking substances to cope? So you're going to look at those things, and it's normal to have depression. Any mental health issue, though, is going to be highlighted by two things: chronicity and how long it lasts. What's the degree of chronicity and how long it has last?
Mm-hmm.
If you get depression and let's say you get into a funk, you're depressed for a couple of days, a week, that's okay. But if that's a chronic and consistent mood that you're in for 4, 5, 6 months, that is a problem. Now you're probably dealing with clinical depression and things like that.
And I think, we've had these discussions. I mean, unfortunately, man, we've seen, one crisis after another, but we talk about communities that see, violence. And I mean, it didn't even relate to what took place in Maine, but think about all of those issues out there that aren't diagnosed.
Yeah. But for anyone who either feels that they need help, need someone to talk to, or knows someone who may need someone to talk to, here in the state of Florida, there's a hotline that they can call, and that number is 844-400-2659. Again, that's 844-400-2659. And it doesn't hurt if you're feeling pain, if you're feeling depressed, to just reach out to someone. And one of the hardest things too, Doc, is that sometimes it's difficult to talk to people that are close to you or family, and easy to talk to someone that's a stranger about these things.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true. But most time, that's where you want to create that therapeutic bond, what's called a therapeutic bond. And that takes time. I can tell you now that 80% of the clients that I have dealt with and ended up providing treatment, when they first met me, they lied.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to tell you everything. And that's the beautiful thing about the I'm trying to think of the program. What's your program?
Which one we got? Because we were talking to power teams earlier.
Yeah, the for your history. My mind went blank.
ACEs.
Yeah, ACEs. That's an excellent tool. Anybody can give you the ACEs test, and it's independent of you because you're providing a simple assessment to determine if they need help. Then you can point that out.
And even though it stands for adverse childhood experience, we've all had some.
Yeah. So Rod, your program, it speaks to that. Anyone can go to it and utilize it to help the person discover some of the triggers.
Yeah.
Okay. Because whether we want to admit it or not, our pathology, our past, what we've been through is what shaped our now.
You're right.
And we've got to understand that. Stop blaming yourself. Stop blaming mama and papa. Go get help. It's simply a thing of overcoming what you believe now and getting a new mindset and focusing on what many people are struggling with. They think it's untreatable, so they don't seek the treatment. Now, schizophrenia and genetic based illnesses, those are a different breed because they are due to brain changes, brain chemistry changes often, and so they need a different approach. They need a different approach through psychiatry, where medication can be prescribed for them. I'm saying described, but I mean prescribed.
We got you.
For them. So,
but I think on Let's Talk Nation, that's why we got to continue to have these conversations. And Greg, man, thanks for reminding us that this is National Depression and Mental Health Month, and we got to be able to recognize it and also help those that. And Greg, that's why I say I'm still uncomfortable with if you see somebody that needs help. I don't know how you approach that person. I don't know how the delivery is, and you that's what I'm uncomfortable with. But
Yeah.
if you see somebody that needs help, I mean, I guess there's no two ways about it. You
So
just
what would you say to a person? What do you think you should say to a person if you approach them and you notice that they are needing help?
not being somebody that I'm not in the business, I'm not an expert, but just some red flag triggers for me is if you see some erratic behavior that's continuous, and depending on the relationship you have with the person. I mean, Greg could call me up and you can call me and say, "Brother Love, let's go grab a bite to eat," and I would take what you guys are saying to me that, "Hey man, you all right?" Because to me, I'm gonna be like, they must see something that's taking place with me or see a certain behavior that's taking place with me. But again, with the same token, if you don't have that kind of relationship with
That's
somebody,
the right approach for you. There's nothing wrong with saying, "Are you all right?"
Yeah.
Okay, and then you follow up and say, I'm here to help. If you need help, what's going on?
but what about people who don't have those type of relationships? You still identify. I mean, I didn't want us to go this deep into it, but
if now is not the time to talk about it, what else is? Yeah.
So that's the only thing. And when I think about this, I think about what about those folk that are seeing from people that they're in contact with. They may not have that kind of relationship. How do you approach that? I don't know.
First thing you want to do is try to establish rapport, just like with anybody. If you're uncomfortable in general with just meeting people, walking up to people, then I would suggest you not do it. You got to feel comfortable approaching people,
right?
Okay, and if the situation looks safe, that's the number one thing, because you don't want to become a hostage.
To
somebody that is at the height of a
an episode.
crisis.
Yeah. But the other thing too, though, that people need to realize is that if you realize or recognize that someone is a danger to themselves or to others, call law enforcement.
You're right.
That there is a tool that is used for circumstance like that, and it's called Baker Act. And you can contact law enforcement. Law enforcement will come out and they will assess and determine if a person is a danger to themselves or to others, and if so, they will have them placed in a facility for up to 72 hours. So I mean, things like that. I know that we say that law enforcement does, that they're doing a lot now, but that is one of the things that law enforcement is able to do because no one else can take away someone's liberty by placing them in a facility for 72 hours or less to be assessed.
And one thing is, you have to use the right terminology when you do call law enforcement. You need to say, "Hey, I see someone that I'm concerned may harm someone else or self-harm.
Yeah,
I think that they're going through some type of mental crisis event."
Right.
And that's all you got to say. Don't make it a crime.
Right.
And don't cause
don't have to come out there with guns drawn and things like that. Yeah.
I got to say this. I've gotten good at segueing. And that is such a difficult thing to segue from, because
I'll get up, go back to
that's a segue. But with that, Greg, because I mean, there's no good segue from that. But Greg, United States finally has a Speaker of the House.
Listen, you should be jumping up and down and clicking your heels. That's good. It was a Republican Party for 2 weeks. Man, love 2 weeks.
Hey, and y'all got me pretty good on it.
How many candidates for Speaker of the House did they go through? 4?
Was it? I mean, wasn't it?
I mean, like legitimate. Not people just throwing the hat in the ring, but like legitimate 4 people. You had Scalise, Jeffries, McHenry.
What was it? Donald's down at Okay, so he was 1 of 9 at the time.
Yeah, and I'm talking about like the big 4.
Yeah.
So like I said, like Scalise, Jeffries, McHenry, who was the Speaker pro tem.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, Brother Love, this guy out of the 4th Congressional District in Louisiana, by the name of James Michael Johnson, goes by the name of Mike Johnson. Has emerged, and I believe it was a unanimous vote for Mr. Johnson, Speaker Johnson.
But Greg, would you say, because I mean, you and I and Doc, we listen and watch all the talking heads all the time, but it may have been the fact that nobody knew who he was to the extent that he was able to get, I guess, nominated and confirmed.
I think to a large extent that's what it was. I mean, he was not and leadership.
Mhm.
Some of the appointments that he had, because I actually had to go and look him up. I didn't know a whole lot about him, and I forgot what exactly I was doing, but I look up and they say, there's a new Speaker of the House. I was like, well, where did that come from? And I saw who it was, and so I looked him up, and he's had no big committee,
Correct.
leadership positions and things like that. He was the vice chair of the House Republican Conference. With who was that? With Kevin
McCarthy?
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy, who was the chair,
Mhm.
but now he's the chair, obviously. He was the chair of the Republican Study Committee, which I still don't know what that is. What they studying for?
Republican Study Commission? Well, I don't.
What's that all about?
I don't know, but Greg, how many days are we away from
Now, 45 day. I want to say we're 15 days out. But here's the other thing too, Brother Love, and this is what this is a testament, Brother Love, of the American dream. All right, this is at least for people in Louisiana. In 2015, Mike Johnson ran for and won a seat in the Louisiana House of Representatives. Now, what's that? 8 years later, he is now second in the line of succession in terms of being the leader of the free world.
Yeah, hey.
No other political experience that I can see aside from running for the Louisiana House of Representatives, and now he is Speaker of the House.
Doc Polite is the one that called me to tell me we finally got somebody to be the Speaker of the House.
Mhm.
I didn't know that was going to take place that quickly.
What you mean quick?
Greg, what?
That ain't quick.
2 weeks. I mean, but it's not been what we have witnessed in our history with selecting a Speaker of the House.
No. This is unprecedented. The whole thing with Kevin McCarthy was unprecedented. The fact that it took 15 rounds of votes, the fact that he was removed as Speaker of the House with one single vote or one single move resolution to have him replaced.
Great, that was a bad deal. I mean, you made that deal. You knew it was going to come.
Well, listen, he never thought that it would happen. And if Democrats did not technically join forces with Matt Gaetz, it would not have happened. So I don't know where we go from here, Brother Love, but it's going to be interesting to continue to watch what's taking place in what has been termed the swamp.
Well, here's a good segue.
Mhm.
We're talking about elected leaders in the United States.
I see where you're going.
You see where I'm going,
like
Greg?
what you're doing.
And man, I tell you, and we got to take our hats off, man, to our executive producer and Armando, our engineer.
Mhm.
Man, those alphas, man, when you talk about voter education.
Yeah.
Rick, the barbershop,
Weston Kennedy. Thank you again to the proprietor of Weston Kennedy for allowing us to come in to bring in the Delta Xi Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, and just having a very candid conversation about voter issues and voter education and how people determine and find out information about candidates and about issues.
When you say that, Greg, when you say having a candid conversation, you got to emphasize a candid conversation, man, because man, we had diversity in the room. We had we had some young brothers in the room, man, that was telling us why they believe it was important for them to participate in the process. But we also had, some individuals there telling us why possibly they didn't feel like voting actually made a difference. So, I mean, it was a very, very candid conversation. And man, I just got to take my hats off because that's a fraternity that you would know a little something about, right?
Just a little bit. I got my gold card. I know a little bit about it. But Brother Love, let's circle back and let's talk a little bit more because we didn't get a chance to hit on everything that we could have on the topic of voter education and different things of that nature. And one of the things, and the two young men, the young lions that were in the den, was CJ Battles and Brother Bowles. And Brother Bowles is still a undergrad student over at University of Central Florida. And just coming in and hearing the conversation. And you're right, there was one more seasoned voter, not as old as the oldest voter in the room, which I believe probably was John Ellis may have been the oldest voter, or Brother Rackley may have been the oldest voter. And to kind of hear the I guess for lack of a better term, the juvenile in the bunch who said that voting, a lot of times people feel hopeless because voting doesn't seem to change things.
Mhm.
And why do you want to continue to vote if it's not going to change anything? And the question was posed to the younger guys in the audience or in the discussion. When you hear someone that's been voting for 20 years say that, how does that make you feel?
Mhm.
And I don't know if that kind of contributes to the apathy that young people also feel towards voting, because a lot of times young people are saying, I don't want to vote because it's not going to make a difference.
Mhm.
It's getting more and more commonplace, but it was rare in days of old where older voters were saying, I don't want to vote because I don't feel it's going to make a difference.
You're right. You're right.
So,
But I think a lot of the dialogue, Greg, that took place there, especially when we started drilling down and making the point that when you see things that are taking place in communities that you live,
mhm.
and some of the things you may not like, some of the things you may not disagree, but you don't have a chance if you don't participate in the process,
Right.
and let whoever know that's making those decisions, or who you could actually help elect to
Right.
make those decisions. If you throw your hands up and say I'm not going to participate in this process, then things will never get any better in that respect.
But now, not only that though, Brother Love, things won't get any better, particularly for African American voters.
Mhm.
And we kind of, I was hoping we could engage a little bit more on this topic, in a room full of folks, because I think there was a thirst and a hunger for this part of the conversation. And the part of the conversation that I want us to circle back on, and at the next, voter education or, voter apathy forum or whatever it is that we're going to term it, the conversation of, and I think you asked the question of, if 95% of a group of individuals vote one way, can they really expect there to be change
Right.
if people have come to rely on their vote without really giving anything back?
Mhm.
And, I think that is the question that African American voters are more and more going to have to address and be willing to respond to. Because right now, regardless of how you want to say it, voter power, voter influence, or whatever the case may be, there is a segment, actually there are two segments of the population right now that people have to fight for their votes. You have your Asian Americans
Mhm.
that are becoming more and more attuned to the political process of what's taking place. And you also have the Hispanic Americans
Mhm.
who are becoming more and more tuned in and dialed in with how to move the needle in terms of political influences. And they do those things, Brother Love, and they're able to do it not because they vote one particular party,
Correct. Yeah.
but because they
Mhm.
vote in such a way that every single election, a party has to fight for and vie for their votes.
On that note, and Greg, it was real interesting, and I appreciate you remembering to bring it up. But the conversation, to the extent that I think it was last year, we were on air and we were having a conversation. I believe the Democratic Hispanic Caucus
Mhm.
contributed like $150,000
Yeah.
to get out the Hispanic vote. Which, man, we were talking about our Latino brothers and sisters, and basically applauding them for their strategic approach to making sure that people earn their vote. But when you look at the African American community, you may have somebody that will get on the ground 30 days before an election.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an investment.
No, not at all. Not at all. But here's the thing also, Brother Love, and I think that this is where it's kind of missed also.
Mhm.
And I could be wrong. But riddle me this just for a moment, brother. Riddle me this just for a moment. Have you ever seen Hispanic voters doing souls to the polls, or making concerted efforts to pull themselves together to vote in a block, one way or the other?
I have not seen the souls to the polls in the Latino community, and
Or anything similar.
you're right. You're right.
And so the question that I have is, how is it that they are one of the more sought out votes,
Mhm.
but they're not one of the votes that vote lockstep with each other?
Well, I'm gonna throw this out to you, Greg.
Mhm.
And I mean, I heard this said one time, and I just thought about it, man. When you talk about a a bad business logic as it relates to continuing to do the same thing over and over again, but in that respect, when we talk about 90 some odd percent of a race that votes for a specific party, and then you have to ask yourself the question, why don't we see Republicans come to ask, what are some of your needs? What can I help you with? Why?
Well, if I can interject just a little bit, and I'm doing this from a different space. I'm doing this from a different space. I'm doing this from the space, and I don't know if people notice or not, but I'm doing this from the space of an individual who once was a Republican who became a Democrat. I wasn't a Democrat. I was a Republican, and then I became a Democrat, 15 years ago? I think it's been like 15 years ago now. And I will tell you that even though I am a Democrat, and I vote people over party anyways, but I'm still a Democrat. But the moment anyone hears that I used to be a Republican, they automatically shut off on me. And I think that what Republicans face is that the moment that someone says that they are Republican, they're automatically put into this box of you're racist, you're Uncle Tom, you don't like black people, you don't like minorities, you're ultra wealthy. And so I think that a lot of times Republicans are I don't want to say afraid, but they feel like once they put that label on themselves, then folks are going to denigrate them and vilify.
Yeah, you're right. Well, Greg, I want us to, man, just kind of hang on that note, man. We're going to take a quick commercial break, man, and I want to come back to that, man, because I think that's worth discussing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So listen, why don't y'all come back, hear this great this conversation about our extension of the conversation of voter education on Let's Talk Nation. They caught us talking.
They caught us talking. Hey, Greg, man, I tell you, our sponsor with the suits, man.
Alan Damon, the Custom Clothier. Once again, they're sponsoring the show tonight, and we just want to say thank you to them. And so anyone who wants to be a sponsor of Let's Talk Network or Let's Talk Nation, all you got to do is just go to the website, and we're more than happy to put you on the website or have you to be a part of the show. So we just want to say thank you again.
Hey, them nice press suits. Greg, man, we were talking about, I guess, man, it might be political diversity.
Or the lack thereof. Depending on where you're looking.
But one of the other things, man, that we've had discussion and conversation about is that when I've been engaged by some individuals and they're going on this, and I'm gonna call it a tangent about what Republicans aren't doing to help. And then I come back with this one question, man, that really will bring a great deal of silence. And that one question is, have you ever gone in and sat down and had a conversation with them to tell them about what your interests are, what you'd like to see them engage in? And that's when the silence comes about.
Because people don't go and do it. And that is, that is the thing that baffles me more than anything else, is that whether you are a Democrat, whether you're black, or whether you're male or female, the fact that you do not seek out individuals to have a conversation with that could potentially bring resources to your area is baffling.
Mhm.
And if the only reason why you won't sit down and talk to someone is because of their political affiliation, then you are potentially missing out on an opportunity to get things done.
Well, since we're telling people about that, Greg, I think we do need to also say, basically, we're in November now.
Oh yeah,
and there's 2 months before we go into the 2024 Florida legislative session.
mm-hmm.
And if you're waiting to now to actually look at what do you need, because some of the things, man, that have been discussed, we saw this person that was released back into the community. They were deemed incompetent to stand trial, and the jail basically could not hold this individual. And so the question was the courts doing the job? Was the state attorney doing the job? Was law enforcement doing the job? And Greg, the answer is better laws need to be
It's
enacted.
a legislative issue.
A legislative issue.
Mm-hmm.
But those are kind of discussions, man, because I understood the community's frustration. I understood the community's fears. But if you don't know where to start, then that's part of the problem too.
But here's the other thing too, though, Brother Love, and and folks, again, they have to get out of their own way of thinking, I'm not going to talk to this person because they're a Republican. And in much the same way, I'm not going to talk to this person because they're a Democrat or because they're independent. And you have to be willing to have conversations with those individuals that can effectuate change. Yeah. And so, like, for that issue that you're talking about, the individual that was released back into the community, was going to be released back into the community. Why is it that Democrats in the community are not going to and lobbying the Republican members of the House or the Senate here in the state of Florida to say, hey, listen, this is an issue taking place in our community. We would like your support in changing the laws to determine or to make sure that this does not happen or become an issue again. And that's the part that I think that more Democrats and more African Americans need to be willing to do, is have conversations with people of other political parties.
And you're right, Greg. And it's an education process, because we had Doc help me with it. Berglund Construction on the show last Wednesday with small business advocates, Mina Robinson. We also had Pastor Hezekiah Bradford in here with us. Greg, you and I are from the neck of the woods, man. Did you realize Orlando Health is building a $52 million behavioral hospital in Apopka, right behind one of the major big block stores?
Yeah, wasn't aware of that.
And so I'm thinking, man, mental health hospital. But then I was thinking about this guy that's walking the street that has a record the length of your arm, but this hospital is not being built for something such as that. It doesn't have the securities of it. But Berglund Construction is basically doing outreach, man, so that a lot of those small businesses in that community could actually become subcontractors. And we know how costs escalate. I mean, yeah, it's great, man, that we're here in 100,000 square foot hospital, and the fact that we're talking about 115 beds, but it also is an economic development opportunity for small businesses.
No, absolutely. So, and when we talk about economic development, small communities or otherwise, again, you got to be able to have those conversations, and you have to be able to tap into the individuals who are able to make some change. Now, when we went to the break, we were talking about something else, and we just wanted to kind of hit on this just a little bit more. I had a conversation with someone who was a Republican one time before. And one of the questions that I had was, when we're having these issues in these communities, why don't we see you there? And the response that he gave was, somewhat enlightening. And the answer to the question was, well, have you invited me there? And, I had to sit there and have to think about it. I was like, well, no, we have not invited you here. And so a lot of times there may be individuals who are sympathetic to what's taking place in the communities, even if they don't look like you, sound like you, same party as you, who are sympathetic and can help to bring about the change that you are looking for in your community, i.e., the education center.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that was not pushed through by Democrats for the most part.
You're right. You're right.
You know?
But you know what, Greg, you hit right on the point, man. I mean, I guess you must first extend the invitation and then look at a person's patterns to see if they're going to be welcoming those invitations. But Greg, you know, there was something else that you and I, we started talking about 5 years ago. And that was when we had a slew of candidates that would come on the show.
Oh, yeah.
And then after they lost election,
we didn't see them again.
We didn't see them again.
Yeah.
And so that was something else, man, that we really need to pay attention to.
And but that was the other thing that came out of the conversation at the barbershop. And again, what we're talking about the barbershop talk, Let's Talk Nation, in conjunction with the Deltas Our Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha. And a part of the conversation revolved around accountability and not just holding elected officials accountable. And we'll talk about that here in a second, because I don't think enough is done to hold elected officials accountable, but also those individuals who step out and they say, hey, I want to bring about change in the community. If you're really and truly wanting to effectuate change in the community and you're really committed to it, if you don't win the race, are you going to be back, and are you going to come back and continue to do the work?
Well, shoot, Greg, we know the answer to that.
For a lot of 90 to 95% of the times, the answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no. And so the other part, the accountability part is, and this was interesting also, is a part of the conversation was, a lot of times folks say things on the campaign trail and they say that they make promises and different things like that. And we didn't really get into this as much as I thought that we would. But you know what I think, Brother Love, is I think sometimes people who are on the campaign trail don't even realize what they're able to do or can't do as elected officials.
But you're right. But then the other thing, Greg, that I will say is, once a person does get elected, they still need those constituents to raise their voice, because, in many instances, I mean, if you look at the fact that they're only one vote, and if you look at it from a Tallahassee perspective, it gets a little dense from that perspective, but they still need the local support, even when you get elected into a position.
But now remember but how much of the local support do they actually need? And remember, we talked about this too, because you have some areas, and in particular, we were talking about a city district in Orlando where you have approximately 26,000 people in that district, but individuals can be elected with only less than 3,000 votes.
Yeah.
And if you look at the mayor of Orlando, one of the larger, more progressive cities in the South, the mayor of Orlando, I think it's over 200,000 people who are in the city proper, Orlando, who can vote. And I believe he won with 10% of that number. I don't think that he's winning with 80, 90,000 people. It's just not happening.
So, Greg, tell me off the top of your head, because you bring it. This is a good point. What do you think really compels or motivates people to vote?
A lot of times, I think in the Black community, people vote because people tell them that they have to vote. And a lot of times what happens is, not only do they tell you that you have to vote, but they're telling you who to vote for. That is a huge problem in the African-American community, is that people, and listen, I don't want to say I'm guilty of it, but I will get calls from time to time. I don't know who this person is. Tell me who I should vote for. And I have friends that tell me that. And what I do is I say, well, listen, I'm not going to tell you to vote for, but this is who this person is. This is what they've done, and all of the other things. I give them information about the person. I won't say this is who you vote for. But I think that for the most part, voter apathy is also voter laziness, because a lot of voters don't want to take the time to learn about the individuals who are seeking to be elected in office. And they will allow other people to tell them who it is that needs to be in office or who needs to be in that seat.
Well, you hit on another point too, because aside from talking about the individual credentials, we've had Dr. Aubrey Jewett come on the show and not talk about the candidates, but talk about the issues.
That's right.
that are out there. So you got to be just as informed about the issues that are taking place as well.
I mean, think about the number of individuals that will call us and say, hey, talk to us about these amendments that are taking place. And listen, I applaud them for even asking. That's the first step. But it's amazing the number of people who don't know where to find information about the various amendments or the various issues or what even candidates are talking about. And so, Black voters in particular get left behind again because we're relying on other people to tell us who we need to vote for.
You're right.
And the Democrat Party, again, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a Democrat that I'm a realist also. The Democrat Party is reliant on there being key individuals in the community that are going to guide and direct Black voters on who is the best person for their community.
So basically turn into an individual and that individual having the type and level of influence to say, here's the person you should vote for.
I mean, listen, think about it. Clyburn, South Carolina.
Well, he changed. He is.
Joe Biden was dead in the water. Except I knew what was going to happen. I told y'all that. But Joe Biden was dead in the water. Everybody said, Joe Biden is out of this race. There's nothing he can do to win this race until an influential Black politician said, this is our guy. And that was the only push he needed. And he knew all he needed was one or two African-American elected officials to get behind him and say, this is our guy, and that they would listen to them. Now, let's compare, as funny as it is, Brother Love, let's compare kind of what takes place with the Republican Party. The Republican Party just went through 2 weeks of pure D,
You're right.
whatever you want to call it. Because they didn't want to be lined up behind one person just because they say this is the guy that we need to vote for. I mean, they even look at President Trump. I would challenge you to find any influential Democrat to step out and say Joe Biden should not be running for president. I would challenge you to do that. But I bet that you can name right now at least 5 Republicans, influential Republicans, that will step out and say Donald Trump should not be running for president.
You're right.
That's the difference between how Black voters vote and how other races or other parties or other individuals vote. We rely too much on other people telling us who to vote for as opposed to saying, you know what, this guy doesn't speak for me.
Somebody that we both know that we highly respect. And I like the way he coins it, Greg, and I'm talking about Pastor Richard King. He says, hey, I want to hear, no matter what the party affiliation is, I want to hear who's going to make my community safer.
That's right.
Who is going to make sure my community is going to benefit from economic stimulus. He will have those conversations to the extent that he will say to you, I want to hear what we have in common, no matter what your party affiliation is.
And it's interesting. A good friend of mine, and he's a friend to the show also, and he's been on the show talking about anger or aggression management, John Burns. And one of the things he always talks about is that the one thing that people look for is what brings them together, what commonalities they have. And that sounds like what brother Pastor, I call him my brother too now, but what Pastor Richard King is saying is that I'm trying to find that commonality, irrespective. Is irrespective of word? We're
gonna use it tonight.
Yeah, irrespective of what your party affiliation is, because if I can hear from you that you're going to help my community be safe, if I can hear from you that you're going to bring economic development and opportunities into my community, you're the person that I need to have to speak to the community to show what can be done.
You're right.
All right, so Brother Armando has confirmed it's irregardless. It's not a word.
Hey, but Greg, on that point, and we're talking about economic development. I mean, on that note of economic development, Greg, have you noticed that you got some major retailers that are leaving certain markets?
You know what, Brother Love? And we've been watching this issue for a while, and this whole thing about flash mobs and running in the stores and taking things out, and a number of retailers such as CVS, Walgreens, even some of the larger box stores have decided that they're moving out of certain communities. But Brother Love, is there some commonality with the communities that these retailers are moving out of that you see?
Well, if you take into consideration in some states or some cities that have done bail reform, bail reform to the extent that I don't know, Greg, if it reduces the threshold of the value of the crime that is committed, that there's no longer. I mean, I'm not in the law profession, but I do know bail reform has been impactful. You can follow some of the data on it. Um, and so, Greg, I think if you look at some of those issues where there's not the major deterrent for people not to go in. I mean, you got 10 people, 20 people, like you mentioned, the flash mobs that are walking. And these employers, I mean, rightfully so, in my opinion, are telling their employees, you just call the police. You don't try to engage.
But the problem is, even if they call the police in these areas where they have these bail reforms or no bail laws or whatever you want to call it, specifically, let's call some states, man. You got California, that's one. You have New York, that's one. I want to say Oregon is one, where even if an individual is arrested on a crime, they can be released on their own recognizance without even paying a bail.
Because of the threshold being lower, much lower than it would normally be.
Yeah. And so in those circumstances, the person can go to a store, steal thousands of dollars of merchandise, get arrested, and know that they're going to be back on the streets in less than 24 hours to where they can go to the next store, steal thousands of dollars of merchandise, get arrested, get out, and continue to do the same thing.
So on that note, then fast forward, and we talked about retailers leaving these markets. Greg, when they're leaving these markets, guess what else is going with them?
Oh, jobs.
Yes.
Jobs. And not only that, and it depends on the type of store that it is. Sometimes you're creating food deserts because now if it is a retail store that is a grocery chain or grocery store, which those are leaving also, now you're putting people in the position to where they once had a grocery store or a food source in their community or in their neighborhood that's no longer there. So now they're having to travel further to get food and nutrients and all of that other stuff.
So you about to take me to, your wife was an expert on the show when you talk about nutrition and things of that nature. So now you already have food deserts in poverty-stricken communities, some middle-class communities. But then, Greg, when you see these grocery stores that have access to healthy foods and things of that nature, they're no longer there. So aside from the consequences of economic setbacks, jobs, now it increases those health issues
and leading to comorbidities, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease. I mean, those types of things, which, if no one thinks about this stuff. They don't even think about it on that level of, oh yeah, well, you just got some people that came in and stole some stuff out of the stores. Oh, but wait a minute, now the stores are going to close because, listen, I don't care what anybody says, but love. When these stores go into these communities, they're going there to make money. They're going there to make a profit. And in order to make a profit, they have to sell items without a loss in revenue. And if they're having thousands and thousands of dollars stolen in merchandise, whether it's insured or not, because guess what? Even if it is insured, if they have too many instances of theft in their store, what happens with the insurance?
Right.
The insurance goes up. Yeah. And if the insurance goes up, then the cost of them doing business and staying in that area goes up. And if they have to shut down, then guess what? The jobs leave that area. The merchandise that people rely on leave that area.
And think about the hardworking people that actually go to these stores, and that cost is passed along to the consumer.
Yeah. So with the bail reforms, I mean, and just take a look at, and I want people to take a look at places like New York right now, and listen to what actual New Yorkers have to say about New York, and wonder why it is that more folks are leaving places like California, New York, Oregon. And coming to places like Texas and Florida, it's somewhat revealing on what these changes in policy as it relates to bail, what they do and how they can change communities or affect communities. And just to kind of circle back, because this was a part of the conversation last week also, just kind of in an offhanded sort of way, but saying well, you can't blame the state attorney for doing certain things. But the bigger issue with the state attorney is that the state attorney, prior to the state attorney that we have now, was not charging people with certain things. And that was making communities less and less safe, not from what Greg Jackson says, not from what Rod Love says, but from what law enforcement was saying.
You're right.
And trust me, if I'm going to rely on someone to tell me about the decline in safety in communities because individuals are being let back on the streets, I'm not going to rely on the state attorney to tell me those things. I'm not going to rely on the judges to tell me those things. I'm going to rely on the people who are there on the ground every single day making that determination, and that's what they were telling us.
Greg, when you, I mean, when we sit up here and talk about bail reform, I'm sitting up here. I know we're talking about retail theft and things of that nature, but I'm also sitting up here thinking about public safety.
Yeah.
The correlation between bail reform and I hate to use it in this term, but does it correlate with the lack of public safety?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, unfortunately, but you know, that is the direct correlation to it. So, but you know, look, brother, look, we can talk about this for days. And I tell you what, we need to save this this particular part of the conversation for our next sit down, or whether it be with Delta Xi Lambda, you know, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, or you know, any one of the other you know, of the Divine Nine. You know, the iotas, the omegas, the kappas, the deltas, the zetas, the AKAs, you know, no matter the sigmas, no matter who it is, you know, we want to have these conversations and bring them to a forum where people can have an open and respectable dialogue
Right.
about what's taking place in our community, because that's the only way that you can bring about changes, if we look at it, address it, and then find ways to change it.
Greg, since we're talking about having some dialogue, there's been a lot of dialogue taking place about student loan forgiveness. Resuming, and I'll go ahead and say this, Greg. I don't have a major issue with the forgiveness part. I have a major issue that, in my opinion, the fairness that was applied, it applied to federal student loans. What about those individuals that got private student loans that came from the same economic background that aren't going to benefit from it?
Well, not only that though, brother, what about the people who have paid their loan?
You're right.
And, you know, didn't get any relief. You know, you're forgetting about those people. And, you know, the interesting thing about the love is that, the Supreme Court weighed in on this issue, and they determined that, you know, the Biden administration could not forgive loans in this way. And they, you know, student loan payments resumed in October this month, as a matter of fact. But the funny thing is that I heard today that Joe Biden is again taking steps or efforts to forgive. I think it's $123 billion in student loans. He's trying to find a way to continue to do it. So
So Greg, how is that done? Is that done through some kind of executive order? How is that done?
Yeah. And listen, it's funny, because, you know, people say, well, you know, the president doesn't affect, you know, gas prices. The president, you know, doesn't affect, you know, business and different things like that. But wait a minute, the president can affect, you know, who pays the student loan and who doesn't. And so, you know, I kind of challenge that of people saying, you know, the president doesn't affect gas prices. It's the policies of the president or any administration that will affect. I mean, heck, whatever, you know, Ron DeSantis does in the state of Florida can affect gas prices. So for people to think that, you know, the things that a president does not have an effect, I think that they take somewhat of a limited view of the influence, not necessarily, but the influence of the decisions that administrations through presidents can make.
Well, you're absolutely right, Greg. I know we're winding down, man. And the Alpha's voter education, man. I mean, it was very insightful. You know, we have folk kind of tagging us, asking what elections are coming up.
Yeah, good point. But you got one coming up here soon.
You have
Mayor
Buddy Dyer.
Yep. Well, we have the mayor's race for the city, but we don't want to say.
Okay, yeah,
you're right. You're right. The race and win.
You're right, and then you also have.
But you got to ask the Broncos about it. You got to play the game, man. You know that.
You got to play the game. Hey, and Greg, is it District 5 or 6?
I want to say it's District 6 because it's District 4. And District 4, yeah. Patty Sheehan and Bakari Burns, are up for re-election at this particular time. You know, and that election is November 7th? Yeah, November 7th is when that election is going to take place. You know, would be kind of nice if now it's too late now though. I was going to say it would be kind of nice if we got them in to come in and talk about what's taking place. So yeah, I think that ship has sailed, but you know. Well, listen, we can always get them to come in because we know you know, Bakari Burns. You know, we've had some very good conversations with him in the past. And you know, if there's something that he wants to discuss as it relates to, you know, one of the more progressive cities here in the United States, you know, I'm more than happy to hear what he has to say. Right. So. Rick, one of the hot issues, man, that I'm hearing that's going to be taking place for this 2024 legislative session is healthcare. Of course. So that is going to be, you know, hot on the griddle, so to speak, man. And when you say healthcare, man, it's so broad. Yeah. Is it healthcare in the way of making sure that people
get coverage? Is it healthcare in the way of our seniors and what's taking place? Home healthcare services, which is in high demand
It is.
right now. So I'm just really interested in to know when we say healthcare, it's such a broad issue.
You know, but it would be great if it was healthcare in terms of preventative care.
Yeah.
Because nutrition can help or hurt your health. And so, preventative and, making sure that you have, appropriate places to get good, nutritious food, especially for our young people and our children nowadays. So,
But when you talk about preventative care, though, Greg, you also sitting back saying, hey, it's far more cost effective to have somebody go get regular checkups to try to head something off that could be a very, very expensive endeavor.
what's that old saying? A penny of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
If that's not the saying, I'm going with you on that. I'm going with you on that.
So listen, brother, we got a couple of minutes left.
Ounce of prevention.
An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. That's right. Thank you, Doc.
Doc would know it.
Yep. But just real quick, Brother Love, you ever played what is it when you pick the teams for football and like
Fantasy.
not fantasy, but it is like the brackets. You know what I'm saying? Like your brackets for your March Madness and all that other stuff. Well, Brother Love, I made a pick and I had my horse that was gonna win or at least make it to the Final Four. And I'm sad to say that one of my picks is
out of
already, yeah. And if folks don't know what I'm talking about, for the longest time I was saying that on the Republican side, I thought that Mike Pence was probably going to be the better choice, White might make it to the nomination because of his pedigree and different things like that. And today, your guy Mike Pence announced that he is suspending his campaign.
See, you giving me some late breaking news.
And when presidential candidates talking about suspending campaigns, that means
we know what that means. We know what that means.
Uncle, they got his arm bent. Uncle, was it last night? Well, I heard it this morning. I told you I was still in Colorado time, so I didn't get it till this morning.
So how many left in the race now?
We still got. I mean, you still have Chris got now. Yeah. Who? Nikki Haley is Nikki Haley. And you know who I think is next? Unfortunately, I think that Larry Elder was never in. He was never on the stage. Remember that. But I think that that Tim Scott might be one of the next ones getting bowing out. It's not like him too, because every time I go to South Carolina, I get free food.
Hey, well, tell you what, we will stay tuned to that. And Greg, that's Doc usually will call me and tell me, man, what's happening if I don't already know. But hey, brother, every Monday at 7 p.m., we're going to be in these seats, man, bringing some, what you call it, Greg? Raising everybody's IQ.
Raising that IQ, man.
But until we do that again, hey, Greg, brother, you do not have to go home.
But you got to get out of here.
Until next week on Let's Talk Nation, hey, come join us so that you can join this conversation. We'll see you then.